All right. Good afternoon. I think it is now. Yes, it is afternoon time. I hope you're not finished yet. You haven't even started. Oh, yes. So we are absolutely excited about this next interview. We have here Brian Sullivan, who's anchor of CNBC's Worldwide Exchange, also a senior national correspondent for the network. Because we are honored and delighted that he'll be interviewing the Dish Network co-founder and chairman of the board, Charlie Ergen. We talk a lot about disruption in tech and telecom, but Charlie truly embodies it. My guess is that he started irritating incumbents who thought their positions were safe by earning a walk-on spot on the D1 University of Tennessee basketball team. He started Echostar by selling satellite dishes from the back of a truck in 1980, and eventually added DBS service via Dish, dramatically increasing the video choices available to consumers. He's been at the bleeding edge of the changing ways we watch video. For example, he thoroughly annoyed competitors in video distribution and programmers by creating the Hopper, which allowed consumers to skip commercials. Leslie Moonves, then CBS chairman and CEO, said the Hopper could destroy our ability to give the public what it wants. The public, of course, had different ideas. They loved it. And later, Charlie later launched Sling TV, pioneering over-the-top television. Now he's overseeing the build-out of a brand new facilities-based 5G network, unlike any other in the US today. AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile may not be happy about this, but consumers sure will be. So we are thrilled to have Charlie here today, and we're very much looking forward to this interview.
Scott, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And by the way, just big thanks to you, Scott, and Jane, and the TPI team for getting us here. Right now, I mean, this may be the last conference in America for a few weeks, but we made it. I feel like it's the safest place in the United States right now. But thanks to your team, you were flexible, you were adjusting everything to make sure that we had a great conference, a safe conference. So really nice job. I know you probably haven't slept in about 2 weeks, Scott, so maybe they'll let you stay here for a few days after the conference is over. A terrible setting, by the way, everybody. So, it's funny because having done so many of these in 25 years, you kind of get used to them. But then when you get to know the people that you're talking to, you really realize why there are certain people who do certain things. And there are certainly things like luck and timing that matter in a lot of things. But I don't believe that you can do what Charlie has done without obviously having some keen insight and foresight into the future of audio, video technology, because you've done it since day one, and I think it's going to be a great conversation, Charlie. So thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule and joining us here.
Well, my pleasure, and thanks to Scott and TPI for having me. It's always fun to get up in the mountains in Colorado, and this was a very convenient excuse, so thank you.
Yeah, it's not a terrible place for a conference. Before we get into all the reasons we're here, I do want to ask you, there's some news, it's a little weird, some news from a couple sources that T-Mobile may have had a big data breach, customer data, 100 million. We have not been able to independently confirm it at CNBC. Do you know anything about that? Is there anything you can add to that report?
No, I don't know anything about it, but I mean, I think obviously, all companies, data breaches are too common of an occurrence, and I think telecom networks are really susceptible because obviously the architecture of how we built networks, really was 30 years ago. So a lot of things have changed since then, and it's why the government properly is looking at Chinese vendors and other things because our networks are a little bit insecure, and we'll get into this, but one of the things we're trying to do a little differently is build that in on the front end.
So just to be clear, because they are currently still your partner. No notification to Dish about any kind of data breach.
Yeah, I mean, I think our concern would be we have 9 million customers on the T-Mobile network today, and having just looked at my cell phone before I got up here, we have not seen anything. So maybe hopefully the report is false, but we haven't seen anything, or whether it may not affect our Boost customers because we may be in a different database. But obviously, to the extent that it is, we'll have to deal with it. We have a good team, and we'll deal with it.
Well, if you do find something out, please let us know because your customers would care as well. Now, let's get into it. Speaking of T-Mobile, what is your relationship with T-Mobile like right now? Feels like a 1980s soap opera sometimes.
Well, I mean, I think we're competitors, and
partners,
and we're really competitors, and I think there's things that you would do in the public interest that we just haven't been able to So it's not particularly, it's not, it's in the news. It's not as healthy a relationship as we'd like to see it. Our biggest concern is that we have, millions of customers who rely on their network and their CDMA network. And unilaterally, T-Mobile said we're going to turn that off on January 1st. And that's going to affect our customers. And so we first tried to work that out with T-Mobile, and we weren't able to come to any kind of accommodation. They weren't able to come to any kind of accommodation, because the best way to do it is to, I get the need to always upgrade networks, but obviously it's a situation where I would expect companies to work together, because you have a common objective, which is not to displace consumers. And our Bruce customers are some of the most economically disadvantaged consumers. These are customers that the big guys didn't necessarily go after, and they're more economically disadvantaged. So I think you have to pay a little bit special to their needs, and it clearly is an anti-competitive effort, clearly aimed at Dish. And I can give you real. They're not turning off their 2G network, so they're turning off their 3G network, but they're not turning off their 2G network. Now go figure that out. They're not turning off their Sprint network. They're only turning off the CDMA network, and the only company that it affects, as far as I know, is Boost and our millions of customers that rely on it. So,
why?
And one more thing is, because they're economically depressed, they're not asking for 5G. They're asking for a phone that works, that's economical, and is dependable. And everybody in this audience knows your 5G phone really doesn't do anything more than your 4G phone does. And 5G today is really more of a marketing concept than it is change anybody's life. So it's clearly an anti-competitive effort. We paid for those customers. They'd like to have them back. That's good competition. But let's don't disrupt customers in the process.
In A Few Good Men, when Tom Cruise was hammering Jack Nicholson, and he's like, grave concerns? Is there any other kind? It's grave concerns. The DOJ just said they had grave concerns about this shutting off of the CDMA. Can you take us a little more into that? Why couldn't a deal get struck, or why can't a deal get struck? Is there still chance of some sort of an extension on that you're aware of?
Well, I think, first of all, T-Mobile has new leadership, and they're coming on the heels of a very charismatic John Ledger, and I think to some degree they're finding their way. I think with more mature management, I think you would have worked at a path that maybe wasn't as anti-competitive, and because the best way to handle the customers is for both companies to work together. If we go at it individually, they go at it individually, which they're doing today with free phones, which is good for the consumers, and half-price offers. There's an extraordinary offer. We'll see how that goes. But normally you would work. So the new management, they have to find their role, and I think they're still maturing as a management team, and they've looked at the contract and come to the conclusion that per the contract they can do it. Maybe more seasoned management would say, and they got a huge win from the government when they were able to merge with Sprint. It was very controversial, as many in this audience know. In fact, they got $70 billion of synergy that they've talked to Wall Street about, and that's why we talk about it internally as them being poor winners, or and so it's sometimes hard to be a good winner, and everybody met that guy in grade school that beat you in something, spiked the ball, stuck his finger in your face, and they're now want $71 billion of synergy, and I think it's just a maturation process, and the Justice Department is looking at it. The FCC certainly has ability to step in, and now just today the Colorado PUC looked at that and has a show cause hearing for why they may have made false statements or omissions about their shutoff, because they clearly testified under oath that they were going to leave it on for 3 years. So I prefer to work with them, and I haven't given up hope.
But okay, and they're not here, so I'll take the other side a little bit, Charlie, because 2 years ago, the last time we did this lunch panel was me and a gentleman named Macon Del Rahim, of course former assistant AG at DOJ, and he took heat for maybe you guys getting off too easy or you getting too much on the Boost side. So they would probably argue the other. Do you believe that the way it ultimately has worked out, that there is viable or more competition in that mobile phone market than pre-deal?
Yeah, I still believe in the deal because I know what we're doing at Dish. So clearly 4 competitors in the marketplace is going to be more competitive for the consumer. But I think Sprint was economically challenged, and a competitor for competitor's sake doesn't really ultimately scratch the itch. And so I think the reason that the attorney that Macon and the administration will be proven correct is that we're going to innovate. So we're not just going to compete, but we're going to innovate. And so we're building we're architecting a network from the ground floor up. We have architected a network. It's a greenfield project. So we got to architect for the 21st century. Every network in the United States today is a 20th century network. It was built for voice. It was built for me and you to talk to each other. But the world's changed. And we do a couple really fundamental different things. We adopt ORAN, which we break apart the monopoly of the end-to-end solutions that the hardware carriers, whether it be Canada or the Scandinavians, have employed. So things go slow in our networks. And then the biggest breakthrough is that we're going to put our network in the cloud, what we call cloud native, which means that it's going to be very modern in how it works. We can use things like machine learning, artificial intelligence to continue to improve the network. We have access to the data, which is great for our enterprise customers. And so it's just a whole different. And so we're going to innovate in a way that will show up in competition, although it's going to take us a couple years to finish our network.
Well, I'm going to get more on the technical, because you forced me to read about these radio access networks on the way down here. So now I'm a minor OpenRAN, talking head. But before we get to that, many in the FCC believed they had very little faith in you and Dish that you would be able to build this effectively 4th major mobile phone company. When will you prove them wrong? Will you prove them wrong?
Yeah, it's not just not the FCC and regulators. I mean, I think Wall Street. I think most people a year ago, I think almost everybody was skeptical, and the only way that you're going to answer skeptics is to just do it. And the key for me and the key for our company is to make sure that our employees and our leadership within Dish believe we can do it, and that our vendors and our vendor partners believe we can do it. And there we got 100% alignment. So first step is we've publicly announced Las Vegas will be our first market the deployment will be done by the end of September. So then we get to turn it on, and then we've got to make it work. And we'll be in beta test for at least 90 days while we start putting everything back together and testing and making it work and testing the cloud and making sure everything works. And so the execution risk is still there for sure. And it's a very difficult project, but we've assembled a good team and I'll come back next year and we can talk about whether, the skeptics were right or we were right.
Well, I think we have one sell-side analyst in the crowd, Laura, but this is the question for all the sell-side analysts that may watch this live stream. By the way, it's being live streamed right now on CNBC.com and YouTube if you have colleagues that can't make it. I probably should have said that at the beginning. Hi, everybody out there watching. This is probably a question more for them, but I'm from CNBC, so I'll throw it out there, Charlie. Can you give us kind of an updated roadmap? You got to have 70% population coverage by June 30th of 2023. Is it looking like you're getting there?
Yeah, so I think that the first milestone for us is 20% of the country in June of next year, and no, we haven't. And that's next year, so we're still starting our first city in Las Vegas. So deploying, but we're deploying about 30 cities today. So and then we'll turn them all on between now and then, and that'll be the first milestone. And the skeptics there'll be fewer skeptics, and then the biggest milestone obviously is 70% a year later. And again, we're on track for that, but I've been around business too long to know that you're on track till something happens that you didn't expect. And but so far, our biggest concerns would be supply chain. are big with which we're starting to have seen for the last year, and now maybe they're starting to be with COVID, coming back a little bit. We're a little worried about that, but technically, we don't have to invent anything. There's nothing law of physics. There's nothing we have to do in the hardware that really prevents us from doing it. It's just execution and making sure it's basically the software works together.
Yeah, what I meant by saying you're already kind of there is you got Vegas, then you got parts of Florida that are going to be next. Those two get up and running. Where does that put you? Does that put you at 10%, 8%? How much would it take to get to that 20 threshold?
It's going to take 20% of the population. So obviously we'll gear towards the larger cities, and we'll gear towards cities where the regulatory environment's a little bit easier to from a permitting point of view, where maybe they have a little bit more land and towers that already exist.
Like New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles.
Yeah, those will be three. That'll be 2023 for sure, because we need rooftops and it just takes longer to go through the permitting. But you can imagine that the Southwest, the South, certainly parts of the Midwest are areas where there's a very good tower infrastructure that we can get to a little quicker.
You brought up a really important point actually about the supply chain. I know this. I don't know how much everybody out in the audience hears about this on CNBC. They probably roll their eyes like, why do they keep talking about this? Because it's a major issue. And right now, the third biggest port in China is completely shut down due to COVID, the third largest port. I've been at the docks. Container ships from China to Long Beach and Los Angeles are normally $3,000. They're now $20,000 if you can get one. That's the equivalent of a barrel of oil, or a barrel of oil costing $150 to $175, and gas being $10 a gallon for the industry. And semiconductors are a huge part of this. They go into everything. Can you give us an idea as to whether or not you brought it up, whether supply chain issues could impact the tower rollout? Because I don't know how many of these parts are coming from China. And are you going to go to regulators and say, listen, we need a break on these plans because of these are not our problems, but yet we're being affected by them?
Well, I think the good news is our deployment team ordered ahead, and so we planned for more than 20%. So we have had supply disruptions, but if they don't get any worse, we're on track to get there. The biggest supply, one of the bigger supply disruptions we've had has been handsets. Vietnam has been shut down, where a lot of the handsets, LG exited the business, and we don't have the scale of the other big three incumbents to kind of punch our way above for supply. So that's certainly been an issue, and certainly part of the problem that CDMA shut off will take a little bit longer because we have had those. We were on allocation, for some of our supply.
So it sounds like there is some, either on the tower side, the network side, the handset side, or some combo, there is some hardware risk.
There always is that risk, and certainly the very first thing we do at staff every morning is look and see whether we've had any issues. But right now, I can say we're on track, and we'll have to keep our fingers crossed.
All right, now the OpenRAN. Okay, and I will not pretend, Charlie, that I have any understanding of how it works. I know that Michael Dell is very hot on it. They're your partner in this, cloud-based radio access network. So. There's probably a couple electrical engineers in the audience. I'm not one of them. In layman's terms, what is it? Why does it matter in terms of the build out, and what, if any, impact will it have on your competitors?
Well, it does kind of three things. It first of all breaks apart the radio and the baseband processing, and that's controlled by the Chinese vendors and Nokia, Ericsson in the United States in our networks. And so if you want to make a change, you have to go to Nokia and Ericsson, and it takes them a while because a lot of their software has to be compatible with 4G, 3G, 2G, and everything else. So it makes innovation slow and costly. And when you break that apart, that allows you to buy baseband processing from one vendor and buy radios from any multiple number of vendors. So we're able to have we have a couple partners on the baseband side today, and we have a couple partners on the radio side with more to come. So we just have we have more choice. So it reduces cost. Second thing it does is you're able to use a eCPRI and what we call an X split. In our case, it's 7.2X split, which means that our radios can talk to each other without having to go back to the core, so just more efficiently. And then the third thing that's just no analyst has ever picked up on this yet, but the other thing that it does is we're able to use the RIC card, the radio intelligent controller, and use software there that we can start treating everybody, our network, differently. For example, somebody going 60 miles down the highway is different than somebody using a phone here. But networks today are not intelligent in that sense, and everybody, in terms of the network, is trying to treat it the same, no matter what you're doing. And of course, traffic patterns are different during the day. And so by using that intelligence and it being in the cloud and using machine learning, artificial intelligence, we can start becoming a much more efficient network, which saves cost, and we can innovate. So we're building something materially different. I would say, I've said this publicly many times, but we're building Netflix in a Blockbuster world. So it's not that Blockbuster didn't work. It did. But all Netflix did was take all that video, so to speak, from a Blockbuster store and stick in the cloud. And as soon as they did that, the world changed. Suddenly you didn't have late charges. That's a pretty good consumer feature. Suddenly you could take your TV with you wherever you went, including my hotel room here, right? So the world changed. And suddenly you could make a change to your whole network overnight and produce a different feature to your customers. You can't do that in networks today. That's what we're building, and that's why ultimately people will say that the merger of Sprint and T-Mobile, I think, ultimately will be proven to be a good regulatory decision. But a lot of it depends on us executing and being successful. And if not, then if we can't make it, Sprint probably wasn't going to make it either.
Well, to use your Blockbuster analogy, a lot of people of certain age may remember this thing called Betamax. And Betamax was actually far superior to VHS in terms of clarity, picture. We used it forever in television. But Betamax died because VHS had a better consumer adoption. I'm sure if I was a legacy vendor or network operator here, I would say, okay, Charlie, you're making it sound all great because it's new, but our systems work. We know that. Yours is untested.
I think that's a fair point. And we know the systems today work. And my hats are off to Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, because when COVID hit us 18 months ago, their networks were challenged in a way that none of them expected in a very, very short period of time. And they came through that. First of all, they busted their tails to make things work, but our networks held up surprisingly well. Having said that, the legacy of the way their networks are built just can't take us to where we need to go, and where we need to go is not just about consumers. It also is about our industrial. It's about our national security. It's about industrial production and being efficient in how we manufacture. It's about how we connect things in a more efficient way with the data to affect things like healthcare, or affect things like climate change, or affect things like education. And that's where the wireless industry needs to go. And I would only say this, that our vendor partners believe that I think Amazon is a good partner that knows a lot about telco today and cloud. I think Dell, as you mentioned, knows a lot about it. I think VMware knows a lot about it. I think Palo Alto knows a lot about security. And Echostar and Mavenir are new incumbents that people haven't heard about that are building this base brand. Fujitsu builds great radios for us.
Who are those new names we should keep an eye on?
Echostar and Mavenir, who are building Echostar, and these are U.S. companies. So it's depressing. We gave away this is sad, as an American. We gave away our industry 30 years ago. We gave it to the Chinese. We gave it to the Scandinavians. We gave away our whole infrastructure because they had lower cost of production, or whatever reason we decided to do that. And I think it's important. I think it's important from a national security point of view and from a connectivity point of view that we regain some of that. And for most part, all of our vendors are U.S. We do use Nokia for part of our core, and we do use Fujitsu for radios, right? But there's going to be U.S. the Congress has recognized that in the infrastructure bill. There's $1.5 billion for ORAN grants. I think there's another $500 million to NTIA. So people are starting to recognize that. And as our administration goes around the world and people say, and we say, we don't want you to use the Chinese vendors. The first thing they say is, what's the alternative? And they say, well, there's Nokia, Ericsson, or whoever, and they say, well, they're too expensive and they don't work as good. And I think the United States, if we're successful, then the United States will have something else for people to look at. So,
do you agree with the U.S.'s hardline stance on Huawei?
I don't know enough about it to be an expert, but I know that networks are vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, and we know that in the United States. We have something called legal intercept that we know that the government does, and we know that when you have an end-to-end, the way our team says, when you have end-to-end lock-in, then your whole network's in the dark. And so if the Chinese network's in the dark, then you can get the cockroach in there. And the problem, and when you open it up like we are with ORAN, the cockroach still can get in there, but the light's on so you can see it. In an end-to-end, because it's an open system, in an end-to-end system, controlled system, the cockroach there, you don't know it's there. And so I think a lot of what worries us in the United States is there's probably cockroaches in all the networks, we just can't see them. And so I think that we've tried to build that security in on the front end. We'll have our challenges. But we've got great security vendors being led by Palo Alto, but there's others. And we're building that on the front end. Most networks, when you just had voice calls, I don't know if there's any security built in, very little.
So if you could speak, and I'm sure you have, but if you could right now, and you can through the TV or the people that are here, advise or request something from regulators regarding network security, what should be the one or two first moves that they should make?
Well, I think that the key is to work together and make sure that we've asked for it. We're open to help. So we hope
companies or countries or both.
I think I like the partnership with government when it comes to security. So we're open to suggestion and we're happy to share what we're doing. And certainly I think that as people learn about what we're doing, and obviously they may know what the incumbents do better than I do, then you start finding out how you kind of get down that path to better security. But I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question that an open system in the cloud can be a more secure system than a closed-in system. So.
Let's move on a little bit and talk about the technology side, because there's a lot of people here in different parts of the business here. You've said, with regards to the AT&T deal, because of shared spectrum, with regards to 700 megahertz, you could do some interesting things. I think was the exact quote. Like what? What can you do?
Well, I assume most people know that we entered into a 10-year agreement for an MVNO deal with AT&T. And so it's a moderately advantageous business partnership for both AT&T. They're getting at least $5 billion from us. They certainly will get some. They are our primary MVNO partner, so they'll get most of our majority of our new customers as they sign up and from their competitors. So it's obviously modestly beneficial to them. For us, we get maybe a more willing partner, and we get a better network. So our customers want, and I think most customers, but want a very dependable network, and they want coverage. So my AT&T works pretty well in Aspen and rural parts of rural America. Our T-Mobile network hasn't worked as well, and so we now can go deeper into the American population for customers, particularly since in satellite television we have more rural customers where the T-Mobile network today is still lacking. So it's moderately beneficial to both of us. It could be quite a bit more than that. We have some shared interest. We both have mirror images of 700 megahertz. Maybe you don't need to both build that out. Maybe you can share some infrastructure cost. We both have an interest in 12 gigahertz because we use it for satellite. We think that that's a fantastic frequency for terrestrial, and so we have some shared interest there. We have they would like to use some of our frequencies that we haven't built out yet, particularly places like Los Angeles and Chicago. I'm sure that'll take longer. And so I think there's a lot of things that you could do that are beneficial to both parties, but don't harm the competition between the two. And we see a little of that in Canada where people share networks. We see that in the UK. I think we're starting to see where the government shares frequencies now. So I think you're going to start seeing more of the sharing because the capital costs are so great. And if you can do that and build a better product, I think the consumer wins. And so I think there's more we could do, but those things aren't settled yet. It'll depend on how the relationship goes.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not dunking on L.A. I'm from L.A. I was born in Gardena, grew up there. Chargers fan. Always curious what city the Chargers are going to end up in next. San Antonio. Maybe you'll buy them.
I think going to
Greenwood, Colorado. The Greenwood Chargers. No.
No, Austin's looking right.
Austin, maybe. They would say we're going to be in L.A. That's a different panel. Sorry, different panel. So you said 12 gigahertz. I believe that you have made some requests or suggestions that we need to update some of the rules or possibilities regarding 12 gigahertz. My first question to you is, what is 12 gigahertz and why do we need to update the rules?
Well, we petitioned the FCC to do a public notice rulemaking on 12 gigahertz. It's a frequency that we use for satellite from a geostationary point of view. We have purchased a lot of the country. Michael Dell owns part of the country, or his company does, in an auction for terrestrial use. And then the NGSOs, the non-stationary, so the LEOs also would like to use that frequency. So we spent 5 years asking for the FCC to take a look at it, and the impossible takes a little longer sometimes, but we're pleased that the chairman did that last year, and so now that's up on public notice. And we think that the spectrum has a lot of use in mobile and wireless, and we think it can be used by satellite guys as well. And so we're hopeful that, again, this is one of those things where adults in a room sometimes can solve a problem, but my experience has been, sometimes that doesn't happen, and hopefully the FCC doesn't have to make some tough decisions there. But it's a great frequency that can impact how we do broadband and how we lead in mobile in the United States.
Well, let's talk about the FCC because obviously new administration, not yet fully staffed. How would you describe your relationship with Chair Rosenworcel, the new FCC, because it's still evolving itself?
Yeah, I mean, I start with good government matters. And so not just the FCC, but all our regulatory agencies, including the executive branch and Congress, good government matters. We don't want to be Venezuela. We don't want to be Cuba. Good policy makes, and our company is a result of good policy. So we want to get in the satellite business and do DBS and become the first company in the world to do digital compression in the MPEG-2 standard. It required the government to allocate a spectrum, even though people were skeptical. It required Congress to pass a law that says cable companies can't stop you from carrying programming that they have an interest in. So people don't remember, but the cable companies owned at least a portion of all the programmers back then, and they wouldn't sell to us. So it took good government policy to allow us even to get into the business and make the ultimately billions of dollars investment that we did. So my experience with the FCC has been that to a person on the FCC, they've been willing to listen to us. They've been willing to take meetings. The chairman Rosenworcel has been there a long time. She's extremely smart. She knows policy, but they're a little bit, obviously with a 2-to-2 commission, they're probably not going to engage in anything controversial. And obviously we would encourage the administration to name a 5th commissioner and so that there can be a majority and move some of the policies forward that are probably that maybe become a little bit more controversial. So our experience has been we've benefited from the FCCs at times, and we've been we've been punished by the FCC. I mean, we've gotten some rulings that were almost put us out of business, and we still suffer from today. So, but we've also been the beneficiaries of that. So it's been a mixed bag for us, and we're appreciative of the times when they've supported us.
Well, just between us, what do you what do you think the FCC is going to prioritize when it comes to cellular, when it comes to satellite, DBS? And where should they prioritize? Because I'm sure you have people letting you know what the inclination of this administration is likely to be.
Well, I think I'd say it this way: good decisions are made with good data. So the more information you have, the more data you have, which is why I think things like public notices are good. Then I think you can make better decisions. When they become a zero-sum game between people, you try to get the people ahead to come out with compromise. Businesses know how to compromise. They know how to give to get. All right. It's just sometimes. And again, I was probably one of those guys 30 years ago, but sometimes you decide it's zero-sum game and you have to win everything to be a winner, and sometimes you don't. So I think, obviously this administration, I think net neutrality will be something that they might look at differently than previous administrations. I think they've certainly got to focus on making sure that broadband, we can get broadband out as deep as we can to every American, because that affects, it's like electricity, as one commissioner said at one time. So I think they'll have, I think there's probably a bit more scrutiny of mergers and acquisitions. I think those are the things we expect to see.
You worry about antitrust?
I'm not worried about antitrust. I mean, I think that...
Should some people in this audience be worried about antitrust?
Probably. I don't, we don't have that much money to be, we'd show up on the screen, but, some people in this audience, have a lot of money. And I think that what happens when companies get big, they start doing things that are to stay big. And so they start, you always start out with competition, and the bigger you get, you always start getting around the edges. And so I think there's probably things that I'm not particularly expert on that, and I don't see tons of things that are anti-competitive as far as our company is concerned, but we do see things around the edges.
I mean, obviously, I work for a cable company. Comcast owns NBC Universal, so they're, I'm coming at it from that side. But, I've been doing this 25 years. Do you feel like there is an imbalance, and you may not have a point of view on this, Charlie, I'm just going to throw it out there, of regulation and attention and focus between sort of the FCC and traditional media and new media and internet?
Well, I think
they're coming together.
Yeah,
everything is just blending and blobbing together.
I think what you like to see is a level playing field. So you want to make sure that and some of this stuff has been in the paper, but an app store, is that a level playing field? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Right? Is advertising a level playing field? There's some people regulated and some people unregulated, and so I think and so they have the internet hasn't been as regulated as some other things. So do you believe that's going to change, or should change? I would say to the extent there's not a level playing field, that people ought to look at it, and that'd be my only principles: have a level playing field, let the strong survive, and that's. And again, we're a product of that. The cable companies had positions in the programmers, and they said, we do not want competition. You cannot sell to Dish because they're going to launch a satellite, and you can't sell to them and carry the programming. Right? Congress stepped in. Actually, it wasn't the regulator; it was actually Congress, and stepped in. That was good government. We wouldn't exist. So, are there things like that today? Yeah. I mean, I think Comcast probably faces some of that challenge on certain things, and on the other hand, they benefit probably from the broadband business where they've got a little bit better. They have basically they may be the single source in many places. So, that's for regulators to look at. I'll focus on our business and things. I mean, I think it won't shock anybody, but I think obviously one of the things we think would be an interesting regulator thing is a merger between Dish and DirecTV. I've called that inevitable, right? And I think there's obviously two sides to every coin, but for us to survive in the video business, where we now compete with the very people who give us the programming, and we have to compete with them. This isn't any kind of 3-2 or 4-3 or 2-1 kind of situation. This is a situation, it's 30-29 or something, and the world is different than when we tried to do that, 20 years ago. So That would be one that I think would be a really interesting one, because I think the world has changed so differently. Would the regulators look at that differently than they did 20 years ago? But that's probably the one that's top of mind for our company.
Can you lay some odds on the likelihood of a direct? You're a gambler, on a DirecTV Dish merger. I mean, does the fact that and I'm going to steal your question. We talked about it last night. Does the fact that DirecTV is smaller now make it easier potentially for a deal? See how smart I sound by asking your question?
I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think that the fact that we're just not getting any new subs. So everybody who wants a satellite dish in America has one, and so we're obviously churning to the OTT providers that have hundreds of millions. Now I think there's 3 or 4 companies that have over 100 million. Together, I think we have 30 million, maybe not even 30 million, maybe 22 million or something like that. So I think the fact that the marketplace has kind of spoken is the real reason. TPG now, obviously has completed their acquisition of controlling interest, or at least management control of, and so they obviously would have the big say so in that. But when it comes to odds, I've said it's inevitable. So I don't know what that is. 100%. It may be because one or both companies are bankrupt, but it's inevitable, because at some point you can't justify it. You can't justify the investment in a new satellite today. So they're going to run out of fuel. So and there's still going to be some people who prefer the satellite TV experience. I'm one of them. I like to be able to skip commercials. I'm proud of the fact that this company took on Hollywood and the broadcasters to automatically skip commercials. I was on the front cover with devil's horns as the most hated man in Hollywood. We're okay with that. We're okay with that. So,
why you live in Denver?
Well,
around those parts.
No, that's why
we're dunking on LA again here, Charlie. You realize that?
No, but we did the right thing for broadcasters. That they have to change, and the way commercials. Nobody wants to watch a commercial that has no relevance to them. And the technology exists today where most of you are getting streamed commercials that are relevant to you today, or may be relevant, or that you can interact with. And that technology was there, and they just didn't want to move forward.
Yeah, but there was and this is a little bit sideways, but there was a great article, Kevin Roos, New York Times, I think it was last week, that the subsidized millennial lifestyle is over. Now, he was talking more about Uber and things like that, where venture capital billions made us all be able to get into an Uber and go to Aspen Airport for $9, and the driver got $3 and whatever. But it was you lose money on every trip. And he was talking more about that. But when you think about so much of the internet or content or video or whatever it is, so much of that has been subsidized by shareholders, capital, venture capital, private equity. Do you feel like that is over or should be over, and that you referenced in the paper? Will there be, I think about that, I hope there are papers to be in 5 years, because nobody wants to pay for anything. How does the pricing model need to? My daughter's 17. I don't think she's ever paid for anything.
Yeah.
I have, by the way. I just want to be clear.
I'm old school. I don't think you can spend more money than you take in. But you can look at a long time frame of that, but you can't spend more money than you take in. So I think that
it's not been true for the last 10 years for a lot of companies.
The time frame could be 10 years or longer. Certainly the U.S. government's been 60 years or something. So I don't know how long the time frame, but I don't think the economic model has changed yet. Your value of your company is the net present value of your cash flow. That hadn't changed. And so the only difference is what time frame you take a look at. Some companies, Wall Street allows to take a little bit longer time frame. Certainly they've got confidence in Amazon to take a longer time frame. They've had confidence in Uber to take a longer time frame. So that really is the key. But you ultimately have to get a return on your investment, or you'll be roadkill.
Yeah, and it just feels like, especially from the content side, because you guys don't produce content, but you show content, and it's so much a part of what you do. It seems like there's kind of either a free-for-all in content pricing, or everybody just copies. Let's be $6.99 a month because they're $6.99 a month. Seems like everybody's got the same pricing. I mean, if you were going to advise a content creator right now, because there are some in this audience, whatever, whether they're big or small, I mean, what would you advise them as far as what they should be prepared for to be on Dish, to be on your network, to be on the, whatever content is coming across your new OpenRAN network. How should we view pricing in the future?
Well, I mean, I think it's what good companies. I would just advise think about the consumer experience and go from the consumer experience, and so let the consumer. When in doubt, go with the consumer. So that may affect your bottom line a little bit, one way or the other, short term or long term. But in our case, in satellite TV, it's not as good as experience as it should be. We have 18 minutes of commercials in an hour. My kids won't watch it. It's unwatchable, right? And we're competing against commercial-free TV. Or you want to skip things, or you want to search things, or you want to So I think we can. I think that content providers just need to make their content more consumable by the consumer, easier. And I think a lot of them have done it. Netflix is probably the gold standard of that. Have made their product very easy to consume, and not a lot of friction there. So I think everybody will learn that, and the internet's a little bit different. People. It's nice for consumers because you can kind of jump in and jump out every month, and so churn is higher, and that's a good consumer feature. And we'll have to work our way through it. But I think on satellite television, they get a lot. I'd love to see content make our product a little bit better. Our customers get to skip those commercials, so they get to watch 60 minutes and 40 minutes, but not everybody can do that.
All right, we're going to start to wrap it up. I got 3 sort of quicker questions. We'll kind of go bang, bang, bang. Got about 5 minutes left. Just based on what you have talked about, kind of churning my brain. Sounds like Netflix is the answer, but if not, who is a company or a business leader that you really admire?
Wow, there's a lot. When I started out, and to this day, it was Rupert Murdoch and John Malone, because those were and Ted Turner. Those were kind of the guys. And I probably spent a little bit more time with Mr. Murdoch, and and so I got to know, and I was amazed at the common, and today there's probably obviously Jeff at Amazon, and I think certainly Netflix, and in terms of what they showed real courage. They thought long term. They went against what maybe I remember when Netflix wasn't supposed to they got punished for getting out of the DVD business.
Nobody's going to be ordered DVDs by mail. We all know that.
Yeah, so they got punished on that one. So the thing that I admire, and the thing that I try to teach as part of our culture at Dish, is curiosity. And the one thing that I've noticed, I'm lucky that I get to see a lot of people that have been successful, and I keep saying, why are these people successful? And over the years, I've come to the conclusion that these people are curious, and they're lifelong learners. And because they're lifelong learners, they just end up with more data at their disposal before they make decisions. They make better decisions. I don't think it's that hard to know where the telco industry is going, right? But it's analyzed by how many handset users you have. Right, so I think curiosity is the key for what I look at, and that I just think is a common thread between those people you read about that are really successful.
By the way, 2 separate unrelated notes, because you remind me of one of the guys. The 2 best business books I've read, not even business books. One was Shoe Dog. Raise your hand if you read that, about Phil Knight, Nike. But you remind me of another guy, Kirk Kerkorian, who built Vegas and MGM, because he was and the book's called The Gambler, and it's as good as Shoe Dog. And this guy that's a hell of a story. Just separate note, you got me thinking.
Well, the one I think is Innovator's Dilemma, because what that really says is you have to compete against yourself. You have to reinvent yourself, because if you don't, somebody else will. And that's why DVDs. That's why that was such a courageous thing by Reed and team to go from DVDs to. We looked at that business, right? And all our engineers got together and said, this doesn't make any sense. It costs $1 to download a movie. Well, you can't make any money at it. They were smart enough to realize it was going to cost 1/10 of 1 cent to do it.
But they looked ahead at the future cost.
They looked ahead at the future cost, and it probably wasn't that hard to predict that it was going to go down. But they did it while they had a very successful business. That's where the courage came in. And then the courage to also go into programming.
So where do those now former Dish engineers work?
I don't know.
I mean, where did you mess? Where did they? I mean, I'm not knocking them.
Well, it's my fault. It wasn't their fault.
You said you looked at the business. What does that mean?
It wasn't their fault. It was my fault. I mean, because I didn't ask I didn't ask probing enough questions. And I knew
When was this?
I knew costs went down. I knew costs were going to go down because I'd seen it in our own business. So that was on me.
When was that?
And I still have a job. So it you're going to make mistakes, and you just have to do the goldfish thing they talk about on TED. You just got to forget it and move on. That's another thing that leaders do.
You just quote Ted Lasso?
I didn't quote. There was something about goldfish on there, wasn't there?
He just quoted Ted Lasso from.
Anyway,
When that guy made a bad play, and he goes, the goldfish is the happiest animal in the world. Why? Because it has a 10-second memory. He was trying to tell the guy, you screwed up, be a goldfish.
Yeah, so that's one thing I think good leaders, that good business people that I've met, that they make mistakes and they move on. It's not you don't learn from them, but you just don't do it. You just move on. And so I think that's important.
Be a goldfish. Is that the name of your biography?
I'm not doing a biography.
Why not? You should.
I can't. No, it would not be interesting. I mean, I've done the same thing for 40-something years in business, which is to try to build something and, look ahead where we think things are going and then go build and then adjust along the way when things don't go exactly the way you thought they're going to go, and then hope like heck you get lucky, and hope that, and we've been fortunate. We've gotten, I mean, there's always going to be that moment in your business where it could go either way, and for us, when we've kind of met that moment, I mean, we're on a Chinese rocket for 20 minutes of a controlled explosion. That could have gone either way, and it went our way. And so that you got to have that. There's a lot of people that had great businesses that just got unlucky
or had bad timing.
Timing
is a lot of luck. I mean,
so on that one,
too early.
One of the things that I'm most proud of as a company is that as we started to get into, we were getting the wireless business. We thought we were going to start with LTE and 4G, and there's a place where we got hung up in H block and a couple of things with the FCC. So we didn't have it. It actually put us in a position that we couldn't meet the timing curve of technology, and we had to wait for the next timing, which was 5G. And I'm very proud of the fact that everybody wanted us to build out. Everybody wanted us to build a 4G network. Right? Regulators, Congress, everybody wanted us to build, and we had a moment where they thought about putting us out of business and taking our licenses back. But we would have been out of business if we built a 4G network. So we held on to our courage and said, we're going to build something that really makes a difference. And now whether we execute or not is another story, but we're building something special, and we're building something the FCC is going to be proud of. And I think that was one of our finest moments.
Yeah, and it's just funny reference to Ted Lasso thing because
Do you watch that show?
I watched. I didn't like it. I will say this, but I watched it last night on the plane because I watched a movie called Coda and was crying on the plane. And it's a tiny plane. I'm coming in. I'm like sobbing to myself in the corner of the United flight, and I had to watch something to kind of loosen it up. And that's literally last night was the first time I saw that Goldfish. So it's kind of funny you bring that up. What's the last movie you cried at?
I don't know, Gone with the Wind. And I can't even say I watched that now, right? But I think I did as a kid.
Well, if you want to have some friendly coda on out, I'm not kidding. It's a heartwarming movie anyway. I'll only bring that up because I was so embarrassed. Last thing, the next panel, Scott, your panel, is called How Should We Spend $100 Billion on Infrastructure? So Charlie Ergen is given $100 billion of taxpayer money to build that infrastructure, and very quickly you do what with it?
Oh, is this broadband or is this broadband?
Broadband infrastructure.
I think, and the FCC has done a better job of this now, but I'm a foundation guy. The first thing you got to know is you got to get real maps of broadband. You got to know who's got it and who doesn't. And I'm telling you, you call up Comcast and say, you're not getting a nickel till you tell us the truth under perjury of who you serve and who you don't, what your real speeds are. You can call up us at Dish, and we serve everybody. 100%, here's our speeds. We can tell you that tomorrow. Pretty easy. So
using Rhett Butler era maps for what we should be doing in the 21st century.
So how do you spend $100 billion if you don't? And so you end up with very inefficient wasteful spending, and it doesn't. You get overbuilding, you get stuff that doesn't go the right way. So that's the first thing. Then I think you got to be technology neutral. So you have to say we're not going to pick a particular technology. We're going to be a little bit neutral on how we do that. And the third thing is that I think when you build the maps, every home in the United States, there's an economic way to build it. So if you're very, very rural, if you're that house, back in the woods, it's on a generator, satellite is probably the only way to get there. And, things that people at Starlink and people at Hughes, which we own, and Viasat are doing a good job with that. And then there's fixed wireless. You get a little denser, like maybe part of Aspen here on the hillside. Then fixed wireless is probably the most expensive, and the mobile guys are now with C-band spectrum are coming, and others. And then, for more densely, fiber is probably the way to go. And I think once you get the maps, that'll be fairly obvious. And then I would go faster rather than slower. So even if I didn't have fiber to a place I thought I could get fiber 6 or 7 years from now, I'd want to get them hooked up to fixed wireless or satellite, and then I'll come back in and get them fiber. But I think ultimately where we end up is where you have electricity, you're going to have fiber. I think that's kind of the end goal, and that's probably a 20-year, process. But we can get everybody broadband in the meantime. That the kids can get educated, that they can do Zoom calls, that we can do, and we can do it sooner rather than later. But you got to start with knowledge of who you're dealing with, because otherwise the way I can't make this up, but the way it works now in the boardrooms, everybody's saying, how do we get the government money? And then they spend weeks and months, and probably half of this audience are hired by them. How do we get the money? It'd be nice if we sat in the boardroom and said, how do we serve the customer? And then we'll go ask for the money. That's just not the way it's working in reality. So
it wouldn't be bad if the government also said, how do we serve the customer, given that taxpayers are the customer?
That's why you got to start. I wouldn't grant the first dollar till you showed me, the RDOF thing, which we participated in, and the RDOF was a perfect example. People won government subsidies. There is not a physical building or human being in the territory, in the census unit, right? That's ridiculous. That as a taxpayer, that doesn't make sense. I don't know what that
is. I'm sorry. I should know. RDOF, I don't know.
It was an auction. It was a reverse auction, which was brilliant on how to get government subsidies to provide broadband to customers. And so the problem was you get paid for up on top of that hillside, there's nobody there. And so and then you didn't get, and then there were places that need it that didn't get, that money went to somewhere else. And so that's been pointed out by many in the press, and people have looked at that. And the FCC is doing the right thing, because hopefully without penalty, they'll let people turn in those places where they shouldn't have got money. And without penalty, I hope they do that. And I hope companies are responsible and do it. But the rules are the rules. So, they can go by the rules, but I hope people will be responsible on that. But that's a perfect example.
Well, we'll end it there. And you pointed up to the top of the hill, and I'm looking up at Ajax Mountain, I think is what it is. And I know you've climbed almost every major mountain in the world. So maybe we'll see you doing a day hike up on Ajax later on today, Charlie.
No, Ajax is way too hard for me. That's too steep.
Is it steep? Because I'm looking at it. It does look
I like those.
I thought about doing a little hike later today, but I don't think I can make it.
I like those blue slopes to hike on.
Kind of like the blue slopes to come down on as well.
A double green, man, that's good.
Oh, the double green. Well, this was a double black diamond interview.
No, there is great hiking here. There's great hiking here, for sure.
Well, we'll check it out. So, Charlie, this was a fantastic time. I want to say thank you for my part. You made it easy for me. And thanks to everybody who came. A big round of applause for Charlie Ergen, please. Thank you.